Dealing with an insurance claim is a headache. And after an accident, the idea of hiring a personal injury attorney might just feel like one more thing to add to the pile. But here in Madison, the attorneys at Habish, & Rotier are ready to step in and take that weight off your shoulders. You don't pay any attorney fees unless and until you receive compensation for your case. They've been part of this community for decades, handling the hard stuff so you can focus on healing. National reputation, hometown service. Visit Habish.com or call 1-800-2HABISH. Hey, candle lovers! Got empty jars from your favorite Wisco Home Goods soy candles? Don't toss them, bring them back. Swing by Wisco Home Goods store at 4664 Cottage Grove Road and get $1 off your in-store purchase for every jar you return. They'll clean them up and reuse them in their next batch. Good for the planet and your wallet. Shop local, breathe easy, feel good with Wisco Home Goods. Today on CityCast Madison. Our state is facing a crisis. According to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, in 2020, Wisconsin had the highest rate of homicide against Black women in the country. One Madison lawmaker, Representative Sheila Stubbs, is demanding action after years of inaction. Stubbs plans to reintroduce a bill to create a task force on missing and murdered Black women and girls in our state, and is hopeful that this time the legislation has a real shot at getting through. We sat down with Representative Stubbs to learn more about the issue and the task force's outlook. It's Monday, June 16th. I'm Bianca Martin, and here's what Madison's talking about. Representative Stubbs, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for inviting me today, Bianca. I look forward to having a robust conversation with you.
Yeah, well, we are here today to talk about a pervasive issue in Wisconsin that doesn't get enough attention, but has once again entered the national and local spotlight following a highly publicized criminal case, and that is the matter of missing and murdered Black women. Earlier this month, Maxwell Anderson was convicted in the horrific murder of Sade Robinson, a 19-year-old Black college student in Milwaukee. We won't get too deep into the details of this case, but you, Representative Stubbs, stood with Sade's mother following the guilty verdict announcement. Can you share what was that day like for you?
Well, yes. First of all, again, thank you so much for this interview, and my sympathies and my prayers remain with Mrs. Sheena Scarborough, Mr. Carlos Robinson, and all of Sade Robinson loved ones and friends and community. I had the privilege of supporting Mrs. Scarborough and all of Sade's family in the courtroom on Friday when the guilty verdict was announced. I also joined them for a press conference after court was adjourned. It was just a moment that we embraced, we cried, and I thank God for this verdict. Nothing will bring Sade back. While it is relying on just seeing how the justice system is in this case, this family and everyone who loves Sade still has a long road of healing ahead of them. Mrs. Scarborough was very vocal at the press, saying she hadn't slept, had to reschedule medical appointments. I talked to her and I said, I hope you can get some rest now. Waiting 14 months for this verdict to happen. I will continue to stand by Mrs. Scarborough and fight for all the families with missing and murdered loved ones in the state of Wisconsin. And I plan to reintroduce the legislation to create a task force on missing and murdered African American women and girls in the state of Wisconsin so that we can prevent the next tragedy. We just cannot continue to wait. We've waited almost 3 years. What are we waiting on? How many more victims? How many more stories? How many more families? How many more communities must be traumatized before we make this a priority in the state of Wisconsin?
We're just so grateful that we can have this conversation and elevate the work that you're doing on this issue because it is so critical. And, we're going to get into it, but the situation has a lot of staggering statistics. But ultimately, the story is about people, right? And we want to play a moment from that press conference that you talked about. And it was really moving of Sade's mother, Sheena Scarborough, on Sade's memory.
She will be forever remembered as an angel, a light worker who has touched so many souls, so many lives in the Milwaukee community. She is our hero. She is forever leaving an imprint. She walks in her own path, her own light. She solved her own case. My baby solved her own case. That's how I raised my kids. We don't give up. We are fighters. I demanded justice. I stand tall. I stand affirmative. Sade will continue to walk with me daily and right beside me.
She was an angel. She helped solve her own murder. And so I just wanted to take that moment to say I'm listening to it, but I'm also reliving what that was like standing right next to Mrs. Scarborough as she spoke to the media and holding her hands and holding her up and telling her that we need her. We need her every day. We need her to keep fighting for Sade's memory, Sade's foundation. I just had a moment of reflecting what that felt like standing next to this mother who had to endure 2 weeks of this trial and see some very traumatic images of her daughter and how difficult it was for her in that courtroom and her father and her loved ones. And to be able to come out to the press and stand there after the verdict and speak to the press comes from a place of resiliency. And I commend her. I wrapped my arms around her. I loved her. I prayed with her. I've cried with her. I'm going to continue to lift her up in this community.
And I'm glad that you took that moment to pause and really feel it. And that was the intention of sharing it. And, I was not there, but I saw the clip and saw a woman who is doing this for her daughter and just the strength that would be required that she clearly has in her to have shared so eloquently. And, I it really, really resonated and also is heartbreaking that Black women have to be so strong all the time.
All the time. All the time. And I'm so glad you made that comment. And it is relevant that we come from resiliency and we have to have a faith and a strength that sometimes we say, where do we get that from? As a woman of faith, I know my strength comes from God. I am not ashamed of who I am and what I believe in. And I tell you that because this is really hard work. It is very traumatic. It is days that I find myself in my office crying. It is days that victims' families call me. They share things with me that they haven't shared with the media, or they have just learned from investigations, or they just saw something that was disrespectful to them. And that's what it feels like in this space, that I feel like I am a part of Mrs. Carbo's team, that I'm going through these motions too. There are other victims' families across the state of Wisconsin that call us. We check in. It might be, the birthday of their loved one. It might be mark an anniversary of their missing. But we get an influx amount of emotions. I'm a mom. I'm a grandma. I'm a pastor. I'm a representative. I feel pain. These are really difficult times. And when you hear people say, that was the last moment I saw my loved one and they vanished. And every one of these victims, I can share with you, I would not wish that upon my enemy. This is not a good space to be in. Their lives have changed dramatically. They feel like it's a nightmare that they just can't wake up from. And so I wanted to share that with your listeners as people understand that these cases are complex. Emotions are up and down. The first time I talked with Miss Scarborough, for example, it's building trust.
Right.
She said, what do you want from me? And I was like, I don't want anything. I just want to tell you who I am, introduce myself and tell you the work that I've been working on for 3 years. And I am so sorry that you lost your daughter. I've been trying to get this work before the legislature and get this into law. And hopefully we can save somebody else. We could not save Sade. Just maybe we can save this next victim.
I appreciate that too. And I do want to respond to something that you shared and what we're talking about. At the heart of this, this image that comes out about, that is disrespectful to the family. I think that's at the core of one of the issues that we're facing with this is a disrespect of Black women and Black women's humanity. And, it's one of these things that simultaneously there are these staggering statistics of unequal treatment to Black missing and murdered women. And so it's one of these things that, I'm glad that we started this conversation in humanity and in the trust that needs to be built, and that just the sheer amount of emotional weight that you are carrying with all of these stories. It certainly struck me as I was preparing for this interview, just how much weight you must be carrying and how strong and resilient you are, but how you need help. And that's what this call is about.
And I thank you so much. And with this, I can say I had an opportunity last session to talk about the bill in committee and on the assembly floor. And it was so hard on the assembly floor. I think it's the only moment I've broken down so bad into tears, because I have a reflection of every one of these victims' families that I've spoken with. And you want to make sure you do justice, right, to these cases and speak about it. But it touched my heart. At the time, the co-author was Representative Michael Shaw, former member of the legislature, and he broke down crying. I mean, we are human. We are parents. And we have to do something in the state of Wisconsin, which led me to, why we needed to do something. And just know that in 2020, we had 90,333 Black women missing nationally. It's appalling that nothing is being said, nothing is being done. And when I wake up every day, I learn from stats that 5 Black women were murdered every single day. Every day. So when I wake up, 5 Black women are going to be murdered that day. That's alarming to me. We also learned from our research that from 2019 to 2020, Black female homicide victimization rate in Wisconsin doubled from 10.1 out of 100,000 to 20.2 out of 100,000. This was the most deadly state for Black women that year, was in this great state of Wisconsin that I work, I live, I raised my 14, now she's 15-year-old here. And why is this not an emergency? Why is this not crisis level? How many more victims before we decide to do something in the state? And I'm sorry, I cannot just stand by and not say something and do something. So I want to applaud you. I want to applaud media because of the stats. We know media is 4 times less likely to report on missing and murdered Black women and girls, which is shameful. But I've used every platform that I can get to make sure that missing and murder is a part of my talking points when I'm speaking to media. I just didn't say, okay, I want to talk to me about gun violence. I found a way to talk about missing and murder because we know it has everything to do with human trafficking. Everything to do with human trafficking. Our kids, it's like they're on their way to school, a disappearance. Nobody sees anything. Nobody knows anything. But we know that our kids have been exploited. We know human trafficking is real. We know Milwaukee is a breathing hub for this. I know this because I was a member of the Speaker's Task Force on Human Trafficking, where we traveled the state. We know where Milwaukee is centrally located. It's not far from Minnesota, not far from Iowa, international airports. We know that. And so we need to do something about it. And so I will not stop in this Capitol until this bill is passed.
This episode is sponsored by Babbel. Have you ever picked a vacation spot based on where you won't need a phrase book? With Babbel, the language barrier no longer has to hold you back. You can start speaking a new language with confidence thanks to Babbel's conversation-based techniques. which quickly teach you useful words and phrases about the things you actually talk about in the real world. Babbel has more than a dozen languages available for you to learn at your own pace, with material tailored to your individual proficiency level, interests, and time availability. I'm David Plotz, CEO of CityCast, and I've been learning Spanish with Babbel. What I really love about learning Spanish with Babbel is that it works with me where I am. The app and the website keep track of what I've learned. They help me review what I probably forgot from last time, and always is keeping me engaged with a new challenge based on actual conversations I might have in Spain or Mexico or Colombia. Especially food conversations, because I love food conversations. So get talking with Babbel. I want you to learn another language, so I'm teaming up with Babbel to give you 55% off subscriptions, but only for CityCast listeners at babbel.com/CityCast. Get up to 55% off at babbel.com/CityCast, spelled BABBEL.com/CityCast. Babbel.com/CityCast. Rules and restrictions may apply.
Hank's the family fixer, always with his tool belt. But living with prostate cancer, he needed help. He asked his doctor about Xtandi and enzalutamide. Xtandi 40 milligram tablets treats men with prostate cancer that has spread to other parts of the body and responds to a medical or surgical treatment to lower testosterone. Xtandi may cause serious side effects: seizure, a brain condition called PRESS, allergic reactions, heart disease that can lead to death, falls and bone fractures, swallowing problems, or choking that can lead to death. Stop Xtandi and get medical help at once if your face, tongue, lip, or throat start swelling. Tell your doctor at once if you faint, have a seizure, quickly worsening headache, decreased alertness, confusion, vision problems, chest pain or discomfort, or shortness of breath. Xtandi can cause harm to an unborn baby or miscarriage. Use birth control during and 3 months after Xtandi. Common side effects include muscle and joint pain, feeling unusually tired, hot flashes, constipation, less appetite, diarrhea, high blood pressure, bleeding, falls, fractures, and headache. Talk to your doctor and visit Xtandi.com.
Representative Stubbs, you've been standing on business. For 3 years, as you mentioned, you have been leading the charge to address this issue through introducing this legislation to create a task force. And I do want to dig into that. What are you hoping a task force could accomplish?
There's so much that just needs to be done with this task force, but there are some objectives that I think is really important. And the most important objective is collecting data. We know that the task force will be responsible for investigating the systemic causes of violence against African American women and girls. What is happening in our communities? What is happening in our states? Why has the violence increased, specifically with African American women and girls? We know that we need to improve the data collection. It was really difficult to get updated data collection, even within our own state, making sure the numbers were accurate, making sure that law enforcement is reporting the data so that the Attorney General's office has the information and it's collected in our databases. Understanding the roles and policies in the institutions. Every law enforcement agency does the reporting differently, so we want to get a uniform policy addressed with every agency. I want to understand what happens if I pick up the phone and if I'm reporting somebody missing. What happens? How long does it take you to do the report? What I can share with you is this. As I've talked with victims across our state, the biggest issue that they are facing, Bianca, is law enforcement is not taking the report. They are hesitant in taking the report. They're hesitant in looking for their loved ones. Oftentimes, law enforcement might say something along the notes of, maybe your loved one's in jail. Maybe they just walked away. Maybe they're at someone's house. If it's a juvenile, maybe they're delinquent. They use negative words to describe that loved one. You know, I come from a law enforcement background as a senior probation parole agent for 8 years. We know every second counts. So the moments you're not looking for these loved ones, it's more likely we're probably not going to find them alive. What is the likelihood? And so oftentimes when I've talked to these victims' families, they might say because of the neighborhood they live in, they might have been considered, maybe they're a prostitute. Maybe they're on drugs. Who gets up in the morning and just walks away from their families? One family I can talk about, Miss Georgia Hill, her daughter, Lashiki Hill, became missing in Racine, Wisconsin. And a day before her birthday, and Mrs. Hill says, my daughter came over for her birthday to have lunch, to have dinner, to talk. And she walks off my porch and she vanishes when she turns the corner. Vanishes. Mrs. Hill didn't feel like Racine Police Department was doing the most they could to help her. She eventually got Detective Simon to help her. But she said, I'm going to scream to the top of my voice until somebody hears me. Bianca, it was Dateline who hurt her. And her daughter Lashiki Hill's case is on Dateline. Why didn't anybody else hear her?
The local law enforcement couldn't.
No, yeah. And it was just unnecessary. But most important, Lashiki had 2 sons. She has grandchildren. Mrs. Georgia Hill, life changed. She's raising her grandson. And I want to say he's about 14 years old. And so now you take a grandmother who's a retiree now, raising a grandchild. Her life changed. She was the first victim that came into the state capitol and testified on this hearing. And I'm so grateful that she trusted me, trusted this process.
Well, Representative, I mean, you just pointed out you're a former probation and parole officer, right? So you know how these processes unfold. And let's be honest, it's happening from both ends. When somebody goes missing, when we're thinking about why might they have gone missing, if people have an expectation that that law enforcement is going to care less, then they're going to continue to be the target of these crimes.
Absolutely. And that's why I think it's so important that this task force includes law enforcement. I've been very clear about the makeup of this task force, who needs to be on this task force, why they need to be on this task force, how many members are going to be on this task force. So this task force is going to be made up of 17 members. 3 members will be from law enforcement. 3 members will be from legal experts. 2 experts in the field of gender violence, because it's violence against women. 3 representatives of organizations that directly aid Black female victims. 2 Black female survivors or representatives of victims' families. And I will tell you what, the most important voice or voices of this task force is the victims' voices. We must do this work centered around their voices. They have gone through an experience none of us at that table have gone through. Their lives have changed, but they find the zeal, the energy every day, the willpower to get up. And their loved ones, in the case of Miss Scarborough, Sade is deceased. And the voice of Mrs. Hill was still searching for Lashiki. But they care about the next child, the next Black woman, the next child. They said, couldn't save my child, but just maybe we can save somebody else. And I think that is most important with these families, closure. Whether their loved one is still living or if their loved one was killed or deceased, these families deserve, the least we could do is give them closure.
We dug in a little bit about why Black women specifically might be seeing such high rates of harm when we're seeing, a disparity in terms of law enforcement and how they're carrying out their investigations. You mentioned that in that process, someone might say, oh, that they're a sex worker or this, that, and the other thing. All those people deserve protection as well, right? I just feel like it's important to say, I think when we're talking about Black women, they're at the intersections of a lot of challenges that were offered to them that have nothing to do with who they are as a person, but their identity. And I just wanted to make sure to share that and also recognize that potentially some of these issues could be addressed through thinking about other social safety nets or other sorts of care and consideration that might not put people, not saying that it's the majority of people that go missing or murdered, but people that are in more vulnerable, precarious places, that they're protected as well.
Absolutely. And I think what is some of the other things that I think is so important, and you just spoke about it, but just making sure that we have measures. How do we address what's happening to these Black women? How do we reduce the violence? Is it their community? Is it that they're lacking, jobs, employment, support? treatment trend. What is it that makes our numbers so different? And what I can say to you is this. Our surrounding states are doing something. Minnesota was a lead. Minnesota was the first state to create an office for the indigenous groups, the first to create an office for African American women and girls task force. They have been leaders. In Illinois, they've created a task force for missing and murdered African American women and girls and the Latinos. Like, these states realize something is happening to women, and they've gotten a chance to say, let's do this. But not only that, specifically African American, Latino women are like lead numbers, and they're doing something. I'm going to be very clear. I live in a state, and it is appalling. It is just unacceptable that we've done nothing. And after what happened to Mrs. Robinson, to Sade, a 19-year-old, are you serious? My colleagues in this building are not going to support this legislation. I will continue to call you out. I will continue to put your name in the newspaper. Support this legislation, because I don't want to see another victim. When we can make a difference, we need to make a difference. And I can say this, on the assembly side, I was able to get this bill passed unanimously out of committee, jointly, Republicans and Democrats. It was the Senate side, one Republican, Dewey Strobel, who just would not support the bill. And he's no longer a senator in this building, but there were allegedly 17 senators that were stopping it. I hope you're not going to do that again.
So he was the one voice, Senator Dewey Strobel, he was the one voice, but he had other people behind him that also wanted one person to come forward and vote no.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I'm hoping that's not going to be the case this year. And I want to say this, when I started this conversation, the first time I introduced this bill, I didn't get a single Republican on this bill. But I was encouraged to do something. I reintroduced it again and introduced it without funding. Because I'm like, okay, we got to fund this. At the end of the day, we have to prioritize, right? And so I do understand it was going to be a service that we were requesting the AG's office to do without the funding. They were already doing the Indigenous Task Force. I'm sorry, we have to prioritize. And it did not get the Senate side support to the floor. We did get out of committee unanimously, but I was encouraged to continue. And then Attorney General Call made it clear that he supported the task force. And in the budget, he put $80,200 in fiscal year 26, and he put $99,500 in fiscal year 27 to fund one full-time position to staff the task force. I've been in conversations with Governor Evers, and Governor Evers included the full-time position of Missing and Murdered African American Women and Girls Task Force in his executive budget. And he said, we're going to house this budget in the newly created Office of Violence Prevention, which is based on a bill that I introduced in 2021. Look, I know what's happening in community because I represent community. I know what people are asking me to do, whether they're my constituents, whether they're Wisconsinite. I am in tune and I am enforced. And I can say this, I've had so many people after this verdict walk up to me and say, Representative Stubbs, we've got to get this task force passed. What do you need me to do? And I'm going to say again, we're going to need people to make phone calls. We're going to need people to show up for the hearings. We're going to need emails done. We're going to need you to call my office. We're going to need you to call your representatives. I'm going to need you to call 98 state representatives. And I'm going to need you to call 33 senators. Call the AG's office. Call the governor's office, because this is shameful. And I feel so terrible for Ms. Scarborough and other victims across the state. That in a state where we had the worst numbers, we can't get something done. We have to do this for these victims. We have to do this for their families. And we have to do this in the name of every victim that we've lost in the state of Wisconsin.
I just want to respect and honor your passion. And if anyone didn't hear what you just said, I heard it. That was very clear. I do want to talk about its outlook for passage. You mentioned, the biggest opposition senator, Dewey Strobel, who's no longer in the legislature, but it sounds like he took issue with prioritizing missing and murdered Black women over other women. What's your response to that mindset? Because I have a feeling others might share that.
Look, there was really not a reason not to endorse this task force. He endorsed the Indigenous Task Force. And so what I said to him is, let's not conquer and divide. The Indigenous Task Force is wonderful. I've supported when they come to the Capitol. I've been out there. I've rallied. I've supported. We need each other. But what he was trying to do was conquer and divide people of color. Absolutely not. We're not going to have it. Our numbers, diversity is lower in the state of Wisconsin, less than 11%. And so you need to divide the 11% for what purpose? Again, he really didn't have a reason. He was looking for a reason. I hope that when this bill passes, that he will reflect upon why he should have done something sooner. We have the worst numbers of diversity in the nation. We have the highest infant mortality rate, the highest morbidity rate, the highest number of missing and murdered African American women and girls, the highest number of incarceration of not just juvenile, but also African American men and women. We don't have the highest number of African Americans owning home ownership. We got to deal with redlining. Must I continue? We have the highest child obesity rate in the nation. This is a tale of two cities. And I'm going to stand here and say, this is a tale of two cities where it's the have and have nots. Look, I represent everybody. I'm so honored the 78th Assembly District sent me back. I am a fighter. I will not stop until something is done. And I want you to know in the state of Wisconsin, we have to continue to interrupt these staggering statistics. We have African American families that are living here because they choose to live here. I choose to live here. But let's talk about Milwaukee. The most segregated city in the nation is Milwaukee. So Wisconsin has so many issues. We cannot afford not to embrace thoughts where African Americans are kind of coming forward, or people of other diversities are saying, here's something our community want. Here's something we could do. Just meet us right there. We're not asking for a lot. We're asking to be treated like people. And I want to say this, as the first African American elected to the state legislature from Dane County, I broke 170 years of history. This was hard. This is the hardest job I've ever had. This is a very divisive space, but I've learned how to survive because I'm very strategic. I learned people. I'm a likable person. I'm a hard worker. Last year, I had 25 bills passed into law, and I am in the minority because I learned how to come to work. I'm going to ask all of my colleagues, please pass this bill. We cannot afford to stand with another family. Like, there's so much that's happening in our state that I am crying out, asking you to help reach my colleagues on the other side of the aisle and ask them to please meet us, Democrats, so that we can get things done bipartisan across the state of Wisconsin.
There's something to be said about the fact that, if the issue is focusing on a minority group, Black women are a minority in Wisconsin, but they are overrepresented here in this category. And why is that? What can we learn from that? Why is this happening? Like, not just it's the right thing to do, but it's an overrepresentation, and it should be understood and it should be addressed, right? This has been a hard conversation, and I'm just, so grateful for all of the energy that you are giving us and sharing this information and getting the story out. Before we let you go, Representative Stubbs, now that Strobel, the opposition, is out of the state house, or the leader of the opposition, and money is earmarked in Governor Evers' budget request for the task force, as you mentioned, are you hopeful that 2025 is the year that our state finally does start to take action on this issue?
I'm very hopeful. I'm hopeful because I'm not going to accept no. I am hopeful because I think people that may not have been watching the story, paying attention now is international and national news. It's focused on the state of Wisconsin. It's unfortunate, but the case of Sharday Robinson have national news watching our state, and we need to respond. And I don't think we're in a position not to. We should have 3 years ago. And I think I'm hopeful that way. I will continue to reach out to my colleagues. And I must say this bill has been bipartisan. So I think that makes a difference too. So last session, we had Representative Micah Straw and Senator Jesse James were my Republican authors, and Senator LaTanya Johnson from Milwaukee. And it worked bipartisan because former Representative Straw is no longer here. I have another Republican author that soon we will be announcing to move forward with this legislation. But Senator Jesse James and Senator LaTanya Johnson are still the authors. I'm hopeful because it is bipartisan. And must I say, I had Republicans on this bill last session, and people realize that what I am saying is a real issue. And I think the more people that pay attention to the story, to this bill, I think more people are getting engaged. And I think that's what's going to make a difference.
Representative Sheila Stubbs, thank you so much for making the time. This has been a tremendous and important conversation. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
That was State Representative Sheila Stubbs, who represents parts of South and East Madison. That's all for today, here on CityCast Madison. I'm Bianca Martin, your host. If you enjoyed the show, why not share this episode with someone who cares about women's safety? We'll be back tomorrow morning with more stories from around the city. Until then, take good care and take care of each other.